Yeah, we're live. 6:32 early. 4/7. I think I need a shave. How's everybody doing? It is another live feed. We're going to talk about the video that I posted today, and you guys get to either answer or find out the answer, figure out the answer for the question that I asked in that video. And that is, I ran two different motors, both of them 305s, both of them tune port, iron-headed tune port 305s. The 305 only came that way. There were no aluminum head options on those. Both iron-headed 305 tune port motors, both hydraulic roller motors, but they were different motors and they were run at different times. Not too far away from each other, within 3 or 4 weeks, I think. But the question is this, and the question for there is what we did was we did upgrades on both of them. We put the same kind of head, a little bit different camshaft, same kind of induction system on both of them, and they both ended up making the same power. So we know from that standpoint that the short blocks essentially were the same thing. They both obviously had to have similar compression. Both of them were both in good working order. They both made 360 something horsepower, 350 foot-pounds of torque once we added a heads, cam, and intake manifold too. So both of those are run carbureted. Both of them run with an aluminum dual plane, like an RPM air gap style. Both of them will run with a Holley. I think one was run with a 650, one was run with a 750. Again, the 650 is more than enough. That's like sub 400 horsepower. So 650 is more than enough. The 750 is just, excessive. It works on the dyno, but it's not what I would pick for that combination. I'd pick a 650 for the street, maybe even something smaller. The camshafts were both 218, 224. One of them was a much higher lift version than the other one. But, you could see that, like I said, the duration, especially for me, the intake duration is kind of the determining factor. But the duration numbers kind of dictate what's going to happen. It's not exact. These two weren't exact. I showed the differences between the two finished combinations. But the thing that I want to talk about, and the thing I talked about in that video, is the starting combinations. One of them we just ran as a tune port motor. The problem is, well, here are the problems. And we ran one of them with a tune port, the factory tune port, the way that it came, the way that motor came from, this one came from the Chevy race shop. And then the other one, we had taken the tune port off and wanted to start out with this thing as something more like a what is an LG4 or something, a carbureted version. So I didn't have exactly the manifold for that motor, but we had a cast iron quadrajet, 4-barrel factory manifold, and we had a Q-jet from Sean Murphy, which we know was more than big enough to do what we were doing. Again, in stock trim, these things were making 260 and not 360. In fact, this one was making quite a bit less than that, 225 or something. So my question for that video is, why did the carbureted one with the quadrajet make so much less power? Is it, and this was the question, this was the inaccurate question, is the quadrajet inherently less powerful than the tune port? And so you guys know, the live feed guys that are here, you guys get to hear it first. The answer to that is no. Every time I've tested a dual plane intake manifold versus tune port, the results are always the same. The tune port makes more power down low. It's got really long runners. It's designed to operate effectively in the lower RPM ranges, meaning like 3,500 and below, depending on the size of the motor. On a 305, it might be a little bit higher than that. The dual plane makes quite a bit more peak power, but they both do pretty well. So this didn't do that. So that was what I was expecting. I was expecting the kind of trade-off that I normally see, having tested tune port and carbureted stuff many times in the past. I didn't do it on this 305, and I wish that I would have. So given that it didn't do what all the other ones have done, something was wrong. Something else was going on with this combination. While we were going through this, because I thought that the power was low, it seemed like it was low, even though it was only a 305. Although 350 guys give the 305 guys a hard time. But the 305s are going to be down on power, but not like that. As we saw with the other tune port motor, 260 something, and then 330 foot-pounds of torque, that's what they would do. They do the same thing that a 5-liter Ford does. When I run 5-liter HO Fords of that period, late 80s and early 90s, they make almost an identical power curve to this 305. Everybody puts down the 305. Everyone loves the 5-liter, but they make the same power. So it got me wondering what's going on with the other 305. And quite honestly, I didn't figure this out until I was going through and doing this video. And thanks for the help on lots of the comments, because that's why I do that, is I ask other people, because whenever we're trying to solve a problem, this is something I go over with my boys a lot, is that whenever you're trying to solve a problem, it's always better to have more eyes on that problem. Not that one guy knows more than the other. You just need to not go down that path, because that's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is everybody comes at things from a different perspective. If nothing else, a different geographical perspective. We're looking at it from over here and not from over here or over here or over here or over here. That makes a difference. When you're looking for something, when you've lost something and you lay down on the ground and you get a different perspective and you're looking at stuff, oh, there's my keys, they're under the couch or whatever. So that works too. But also other kinds of perspectives. People, when you're trying to figure out a problem, guys have, and girls, people have different experiences. So they bring all of those experiences to try to help solve that issue. So people look at different things, and that's nothing but good. That people, some people find that I don't know, threatening or whatever, but that's not. It's just nothing but good. So that's why I ask stuff like that. That's why I try to get people involved. Hey, what's going on here? What do you guys think? What's the deal here? And when it dawned on me is when I was doing the video, and because this has been years and years now that I ran these motors, years ago that I ran these motors. And when it dawned on me is when I was putting in what the factory power output range was for a TunePort 305. Going just by my memory, I remember them as 205 to 215 horsepower. That was the range. We had automatics and manuals. They had different power ratings and stuff. And that's as much as I allowed myself, as much as I allowed the available storage space in my brain to remember. That's not the whole story. That's part of the story. The reality is that these things made and were rated as high as 230 horsepower. So before I put that in the video, I looked it up and I'm like, oh, well, we have about a 40 horsepower difference now between what I think would be an L69 representative of an L69 HO carbureted 305 versus a TunePort 305. And I'm thinking, okay, one of those was rated at 190 horsepower. The other one could have been rated as high as 215 horsepower. That's 25. So that's some of it. Those are different. That's not just the carburetor and the fuel injection. As I said, I've tested both those back to back. We know what that difference is. So there's got to be something else. And then once I looked that up and I realized, hey, though the 305 TunePort motor got as high as 230 horsepower. So now we're looking at a 40 horsepower difference, was just the number that we're looking at. But again, the reasoning is not the TunePort versus the carburation. Everybody loves that. And when I do videos for that, lots of people watch it. But that's not the answer, really. The answer, more likely than not, since they made the same power once they were modified, and we put the same type of heads on there with the same combustion chambers and all that stuff, the compressions is the same. So the short blocks were the same. What was different, both of them are hydraulic roller cams, and I didn't look at the stock cylinder head casting number, and the important thing, I didn't look at the block casting numbers either. But the important thing that I did not look at was the factory camshafts. Both of them were hydraulic roller, but they had different camshafts available, which helped change the factory power rating. So what I suspect is when I ran the 305 in carbureted trim, that it probably ran with the lowest horsepower, because we didn't run that motor with a TunePort before we changed it over to carburation. That was a motor where I'm like, well, I just want to take that TunePort stuff off. We've run lots of TunePort stuff already. I just want to take that off. I just need the motor. We just need a 305. And the guys at West Tech were nice enough to go, yeah, we are probably never going to run a tune port. We don't care about those. So we have a bunch of these sitting around, so we don't care about that. So yeah, just take that off and do whatever you need to do. And so I'm thinking, I'm fairly certain that it's not cylinder head or compression related. I'm pretty sure that it's camshaft. I'm pretty sure that one of them is probably the 230 horsepower version, and then one of them was not. I was told online, looking up the information, that some of these early automatic ones may have gotten the same kind of camshaft as the TBI, as a low horsepower TBI stuff. So I think what we have there is probably that. It's probably camshaft related, because I don't think, like I said, I don't think that the Quadrajet will lack the power that we see there in that test. Especially, again, I keep going back to the fact that once they're modified, they made the same power. So that tells us everything was kind of in working order. And we checked everything while we were doing this. There were no bad spark plugs or wires. The distributor was fine. There were no, bad loose rockers, or the compression was all even. All of those normal things that you go through that suck up all the time on the dyno, that make you work and do all that stuff. So, that's what I'm thinking it was. Unfortunately, I don't have, that was all of that stuff, I'm sure, has been thrown away not the tune port stuff probably, but the camshafts, I'm sure, have been probably thrown away. Sometimes we will take them and put them, and we'll take the lifter, especially if you're doing flat tap and stuff, we take the lifters and put them in order and label the lifter box and stuff and tape it with a camshaft so it goes with the cams. So the lifters are with the cams. With hydraulic roller stuff, that's not really a problem. We reuse the factory hydraulic rollers, especially in the one tune port motor that had essentially 0 miles on it. So it was like brand new. But we reused all of that stuff. And then what we do is take the camshaft, and whatever camshaft we put in it, we take that cam box, put the stock cam in it, and the remark it says stock 305 cam of, we don't get into detail about which stock 305 camshaft is. We just say that it was a stock 305 camshaft, and that gets set up to gather dust on the up in the shelving up for West Tech, and stays there until somebody like Richard needs to do another baseline kind of test, and that's that's what happens there. So I feel fairly confident that that's probably it. He says probably and confident in the same sentence. So we'll do a poll here. Okay, would a QJet intake and carb make more horsepower than a TPI system, than a tune port system, if we ran those back to back on the same motor? Let's see what people have to say. Scrolling back, Quadrajet power. That's right. 1 liter Mafia's in the house. Quadrajet everything. Throw the Klingon warship on it. That's right. And I so badly want, when I was doing the tune port for the L99 for the baby LT1, I so wanted to do a double tune port on it. You should do a triple 4-barrel Quadrajet setup. So you want 3 4-barrels on it? LBJ, you can ask any question. The question and answer thing is open to whatever. So anybody out there, if you want to ask any question, it doesn't have to be about this Quadrajet thing or tune ports. It could be about anything. But the VS Racing Turbo that I have is a Gen 2. I don't think it's a Gen 2.5 that I know of. I'm not sure what the difference is between those two. But the Gen 2 works good, and Byron knows what he's doing. So Cal's checking in. Maine's in the house, and Admiral bought some turbos. eBay GT35A2s, those are good. That's the 4-liter Ford. Oh, you wrecked the Mustang? How did you do that? 4-liter Ford single overhead cam with boost. Richard, you may switch from Autopia LA to your live video. Uh-oh. I was waiting for the live videos. I'm here. I'm here live. Should be good for 600 on wastegate with the springs I have in mind. Yeah, are you just using one of them? Or if you're using two of them, 600 is going to be pretty easy. It really doesn't matter what intake system you use on this engine. It's limited by the bore size. It's absolutely not. As we saw when we put different heads on it and camshaft and intake manifold, it made 100 more horsepower. So the bore size thing is not in this power level. It's not that much of a concern. L69 is higher compression than the standard 305. That's true. I stand by my comments on the video. The one that made with the carb that made 224 had the GM peanut cam. I don't know what peanut cam means. I'm not familiar with that phrase. Yeah, 305 works like everything else. It responds to changes in airflow and camshaft and all of that stuff. It does have, Larry, it does have the wrong cam. Put a turbo on it. We did. We ran boost on the 305. It didn't run a turbo on it, but we did run a torque storm on one. Reminds me when you were trying to run the trophy and took the valve covers off and the rockers were barely moving. It is a pretty low lift camshaft. It's in the 300s, I think. There's a small block Chevy 305 that's like a board over 283, and then there's a 305 that's a 350 underboard, right? No, there's a 302 that's an overboard 283, or if you will, a D-stroke 327 or a D-stroke 350. It's a 4-inch bore motor. 230 horsepower, had dual cats and bigger exhausts, 5-speed manual trans only. Yeah, we didn't have to be too concerned about that part of it because we had open exhaust with headers. Yeah, that's the DZ302. 67, 68, and 69. Chevrolet had lots of, as blue collars pointing out there, Chevrolet had lots of different displacements that were fairly close at 262, 263, 265, 267, 302, 305, 307. They had all kinds of stuff that was very, very close. If you look at the last video, it said no way the camshafts were the same. You are correct. Well, we're thinking that you're correct. Sometimes GM would run a smaller cam in cars that didn't have AC. You would think that it would be the other way around. But they did run different cams in sticks and automatics. I know that. The 85 L69 and 85 LB9 were the same long block. That's what I thought, just a different induction system. So the 25 horsepower was just the tune port versus the carburation, right? Which surprises me. I mean, I don't know what their specs were on that Quadrajet, and I don't know if they were allowing it to open all the way. And so, but like I said, every time I've run a carburetor deal, and I need to take a look at my small block stuff and see when I ran the like a performer or RPM upgrade on a factory Quadrajet. Usually the Quadrajet stuff does pretty well, especially through the low RPM range. .307 might have been the one that you're thinking of. Yeah, they did make that. Power curve was the same, but amount was higher on one. Telltale sign the cams are different. So if the cam's different, normally they would make power at a different engine speed, but they would also do that, or they could also possibly do that with a different induction system. Did you use O2 sensors? Q-jets have a gazillion metering rods for the secondaries. I'm sure you know, but I didn't hear it mentioned. Yeah, we tune everything to get the right air fuel and timing to where it makes the most amount of power. And we run a lambda meter on it whenever we're tuning them. What are the main failings of the 305? There aren't any other than it's pretty easy to replace it with a 350. And the 350 not only is it bigger, as I pointed out in the video, it also has a lot of other cylinder head options that the 305 doesn't have. Which manifold are you using for the Q-jet? I don't know. It's some cast iron Q-jet manifold that I had laying around. Tune port would definitely be would have been a good truck engine. I would like to see, people keep mentioning the L69 versus the LB9. I would actually like to see dyno results of both of those. I know how they were rated, but the tune port was the new, like, double throwdown version of their performance motor. But I don't know how, it was rated 25 horsepower difference, or as much as 25 horsepower. I'd like to see what they actually did when somebody compared them, but I've never run a factory fresh HO like 305. I like to add unnecessary complexities to my build so people think I'm smart. I think the opposite of that is true, right? If we try to get unnecessary complex with our stuff, it means that we're probably not smart, that we should just do it the easy way. Peanut cam is a TBI cam. What's the max compression you'd run on an NA48 7500 rod and piston ported head on 93 octane? I don't think you have to worry about making too much static compression on a 4.8 liter. I think the thing that you should worry about is running too much dome on that thing and then having it not be have it work very well. I'd rather have a small combustion chamber and a flatter piston design than I would having a big dome on it. Scott's listing all the small blocks. Let's see. I believe the advisor had a video about modifying the factory small block Chevy intake manifold, carb flange, and plenum area. So I wonder what he's doing. Some call the stock LG4 cam a peanut cam. I think that cam is shared with other stuff. Just watch a Nelson video with a 441 small block making 870. Nice. Yeah, Nelson knows how to make power. The 262 was a V8. They made a 263 that was a V6, the 4.3 liter, but they also made a 4.3 liter V8. In fact, a couple of them. There's a story on Motor Trend with a 305 from an 82 Camaro. It made 197 with the quadrijet carbon intake with the Edelbrock form, made 230. Is that at the tire or is that at the flywheel? What is that? It seems low. Blue collar, is the G92 like an axle option? What is necessary to rev up a 4.8 liter LS to its max reliable piston speed? You don't have to worry about piston speed. You have to worry about valve train. I just want someone to put a quadrajet as a blow through. You could do that if, well, maybe, I don't know, if you enclosed it inside the carb enclosures. Does it point toward the intake as a main reason in your test? No, I think it points to the camshaft. Failing of the 305 is a small bore size. Q-Jet and super stock and stock. Yeah, the stock class guys are making those things work. Larry, you don't like your 305 and your 82 Camaro? Never heard an American speak fondly of the 305. So who do other nationalities speak fondly of it? L69s had a factory aluminum intake. Yeah, I thought that because they're the L46, one of the 350s also had an aluminum quadrajet version, but I don't think it was. I don't think it was any more power though. Like you're saying, I don't think it was a better design, but it would be nice for it to be aluminum though. What 2 305s did you say you'd like to see? Was the LG4 one of them? I'd like to see an L69 and an LB9. Scrolling back. Let's see. Yank the quadjet and put on a Demon or double pumper. I believe those are period correct. An LG4 305 and the 82 Z28, 145 horsepower. Yeah, an LG4 was not gonna win too many races. I had to look at cooling water for water injection. It seems that really hot water is better. Can you please test it with a port injected water injection setup? So you want me to test hot water versus cold water? Are you worried about it getting to the vaporization phase quicker or something? Yeah, Ken, it would make sense that an aluminum version of a quadrajet of a factory intake manifold, if you can update and backdate stuff for a class racing, that seems like it would be valuable just from a weight standpoint. And also from a, hey, this is really stock after I ported it and re-etched it. '86 TPI 305 was rated 190. That's pretty low. That must be an automatic one, right? I know that they derated them. I think from 85 to 86, but then they climbed back up. Someone cut the Mustang off and crushed my front corner. Uh-oh. Was that the Flywheels written by Marlon Davis in 1999? Not that it matters. Marlon's a good guy, or he was a good guy. May he rest in peace. Really sharp and very, very, very meticulous. But I don't see how a 305 can make that little power. It seems odd, given that this tune port motor made 260. have a general data sheet on the factory 305, different light items for an LG4 and L69. Get the crossfire. Yeah. Never seen content on Vortec 305. That's just a 305 with the Vortec heads on it, right? The valve angle on an LB9 is the same as an L69. I have a 250 horse 327 QJet intake. I was comparing it to a 74 350 QJet intake on the 327. Looks like it probably flows better. Yeah, it's hard to tell from looking at something. I only have 3-bar map sensors, signal run springs, and dual solenoids. '78 Z28 had an aluminum high-rise intake from an older Chevelle or something. I have a fresh rebuilt L69 standard bore. Hasn't been started yet in Texas. The problem with trying to run a factory L69 is it has a computer-controlled. I think it has computer-controlled timing, but I know it has a computer-controlled feedback quadrijet on it. Why'd you kill the music in your video? Because I think somebody bought the rights to it, and so that they were doing copyright things on it. And pretty good. There's a local junkyard that have $50 for anything you can carry out. Filled a bunch of buckets with quadrijets. That's good. L69 cam is a flat tappet cam, 202, 207. L98 350 cams had the same specs, but a roller. I ran an L79 camshaft. That would be much bigger than any of these factory cams. About rod to stroke ratio changes with the small bore favor long or short rods. I don't think at this power level and RPM level that those would make any difference at all. Marlon saw a 33 horsepower gain with a Performer RPM. I don't know how you get that big of a gain going from a 4-barrel manifold to a 4-barrel manifold. I can tell you that I didn't do an RPM, but I did do a quadrijet versus another aluminum 4-barrel, though. So we go to right here, over here. Okay, so here's our quadrijet. Okay, so we got a quadrijet and a Wyand Stealth, I think. Not a fantastic manifold. No, it's not a Stealth. It's a Wyand 8004. So not a great manifold, but the quadrijet made more power than the Wyand did, up to 4,100. And then the Wyand made went from 278 to 286, so like 8 horsepower more, and lost that much torque too. So 70, yeah, actually more, like 14 or 15 foot-pounds at 33 or 3400 RPM. So that sort of power gain just seems like a lot like something else was wrong. But I wasn't there. I didn't test it. And Marlon's a sharp guy. And if he was doing I'm hoping that maybe the guys from West Tech were doing the testing and that he was there shooting it. Have you done any testing of modifications to the computer-controlled quadrajets? No, I was talking to Oliver, the guy that won the Nova. He had one of those because he has an L69. Turns out he had to go through it to make it all work. But and by that I mean the motor. We thought we were just going to be able to run it because he got his hands on, somehow traded or whatever, an L69 that we thought was all complete and running, but it turns out it was not. But we were talking about doing a electronic feedback for that. '96 and up, L3305 heads had an L31 style intake with a squirrel vane in the bowl. I'm sure that a factory Vortec 305 has to make more power than all of these motors did, than all these tune port motors and the HO 305. I'm sure that a Vortec headed one, it's got to make a lot more power than those. So does anybody know, is a quadrajet intake manifold different between an LG4 and an L69 and a Monte Carlo? I wouldn't think it would be. I was happy to see this test. I just finished putting a fur barrel on my 305 in an El Camino. I'm guessing I won't be getting 260 horsepower though. With the right camshaft, I think you will. I wonder what the LB9 head casting numbers were compared to the L69. $197 seems comparatively low. Yeah, I've never run anything that made that low a horsepower. L69 early TPIs had 416 heads, 87 to 92 TPIs had L81 heads, 87 L69 had 081 heads. Boost. If a motor made 300 horsepower NA and 400 horsepower maxed out running a small supercharger, if that motor was now up to 400 horsepower NA and the same blower was used, would you still expect 100 horsepower gain? I wouldn't. I don't know what boost level you're running that at in your theoretical equation there. If the boost is very high and you're spinning the blower a lot, you're not going to get 100 horsepower gain, I don't think. I think it's going to be less than that because it sounds like you're getting near the end of the blower. Only the primary meeting rods and the computer-controlled quadjets are controlled by the computer. I know, but that's that's still enough. I can tell you for nothing that the YN2PSP, it's an 8004. Have you tested the quadrojet pattern Edelbrock air gap? I thought that I'm thinking that the ones that we had at West Tech were dual patterns, but I can't swear to that now. Getting rid of my Regal soon. I worked at a Chevy dealership in the 90s and checked the parts catalog for the differences between an LG4 and an L69. And the differences were the pistons. They did have different compression, cam, and carburetor. So did the LG4 have a different quadrijet on it? The TPI can't make more power than the Rochester because the computer setup is focused on emissions control. We don't have any setup for emissions controls when we're running it on the engine dyno. We have a standalone management system. It doesn't have a factory computer on it. So we give the motor the amount of timing and the air fuel that make the most power. Troy, you want to see a Vortec converted to a Q-Jet? A Vortec 305? Freiberger tested a Q-Jet air gap versus a square bore air gap. I didn't know that they made individual manifolds, that they made both of those. I thought that they just did a dual pattern on them. But then I don't know everything. I'm just trying to get my camera to focus here. It kind of likes when I do this, though. It does like that. See, just look at that. Scott, 4 a.m. comes early. All right, man. Got to get me one of those computer-controlled quadrijets. Actually, I'd like to do experimenting with that in terms of fuel mileage. Secondary on the LG4 couldn't open to full throttle. Yeah, that's one of the things that we verified on. This was a Sean Murphy carburetor. I have a Q-Jet Carb Vortec 305 in my 86. So you want to make a standalone controller for a computer controlled quadrijet? I've not seen one. TPI 305s are about equal to an HL 302. They were. I did a big thing for Carcraft where we did mods to both of them. I think ultimately people are going to like the 302 better, just again because you have more cylinder head availability with a 4-inch bore. So there's more things that you could put on there. And then ultimately, I think you could make more power because you have more head choices. But in this 400 horsepower or less range for a 305 or a 302, they're going to do the same kind of thing. There's no reason you couldn't run a Q-Jet, a special agent. There's no reason you can't run a quadrijet on an LS. James, I don't know what you mean by thoughts. Pretty sure I bet my money on the TPI winning the fuel mileage as long as you tune it to 14.71 or something close. I would think. But if they both required the same amount of like if they had the same gear and trans and all that, and they required because of the aero signature and the load and the weight, that they required the same amount of fuel to cruise at the same speed, let's say 60 miles an hour, and we tuned it so that the quadrijet could run at 14.7 and the tune port would run at 14.7, would they get the same mileage? Todd, what's up? Haven't heard from you in a while, brother. What's going on? Just need a carb intake for an LS. You just need an adapter, just that goes from a Holly to a spread bore deal. I purchased a Penta Volvo small block Chevy Vortec aluminum intake manifold with a spread bore carb pad at a swap meet with those, where there would be a large number of those intake manifolds made. I don't know. I don't know what their production numbers are. That's kind of a cool score, though. We've got a built 85-305 carb motor. It gets 25 to 30 miles per gallon. 25 to 30 is a big spread. So a 5 mile per gallon spread seems like a lot. Uh-oh, blood clots. That's not good, man. Reloading. I don't know how much. I don't know what your stock springs are. I don't know how much lift you can get away with. TPI engine has highway lean cruise mode. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I'm not familiar with that. 67% are saying yes. Would a QJet intake and carb make more horsepower than a TPI system on the same motor? Yeah, Dodgy Brothers, the way you drive is the biggest thing that's going to affect fuel mileage. I got two of my QJets from Jet Chip, both modified for the motors they're on. I believe they're about $300 to $400 each. Jesse, 10.5 to 1 is probably okay with 91. You're gonna have to take timing out of it. And then maybe before you put it together, do some polishing on the piston and maybe on the combustion chamber. I don't know what Peanut. I don't know what a 601 head is. Is that a 283 head or something? I'm not too familiar with. I've never run the 283. Look up a 65 Rochester Ramjet. A 28 miles per gallon, a rental charger. Got it up to 33 miles per gallon. It honestly needs to just cruise and was really not thirsty at all. Computer controlled quadrijet isn't that complicated. It has a mixture control solenoid that adjusts based on feedback from an O2 sensor. Yeah, what we wanted to do was figure out a way to trick the sensor reading, so to get the thing to, because I'm sure they put in a value there. They want the thing to cruise at whatever air fuel number is correlated to this voltage input that it's seeing. We want to skew that so we can get it to run leaner until it gets into misfire, basically. Just so we can see if we can improve cruise fuel mileage. Not for power. We don't care about the modified motor. We just wanted to do it for fuel mileage. Sorry, I just got in the live feed. Was the heads on the 305s. On the two stock motors, I don't know if the heads were the same. They were both stock heads, and they were both originally TunePort 305s, and they were both originally TunePort hydraulic roller 305s. but we're kind of leaning more toward the camshafts not being the same as 2 stock camshafts. Seems like a lot of work to find out if the springs will be okay. Well, you just take a spring off and you measure it. We have a spring checker. Westech has a spring checker, although they're not that expensive to buy, I don't think. Anyone do upgrades to injector size and see any difference in performance? Well, you don't want to add a bigger injector and be supplying the same pulse width because you'd be supplying more fuel, and more fuel can be beneficial if you needed more fuel, if you were lean. But if you don't need it, you're just going to make the thing rich, and it's probably going to make less power. You'd only add fuel if you have already somehow added more air. Where are we at? 69%. I think quadrajets are cool. And I like the small primaries because everybody says, oh, with the small primaries, you get good mileage. I remember a guy telling me back in the day that I think it was Riviera or something. He said, yeah, he was telling me that the choke circuitry or something stuck open or stuck closed, and added more fuel, and the thing went like 95 in the quarter. In back in the day, this was a lot because it was that car probably ran 80 or 85 in the quarter, I would imagine. And I remember thinking, why would something like that could adjust? And I didn't know that much about carburetors, but I'm thinking, how could that be possible? How could the carburetor self-adjust and improve its performance? Why wouldn't you just do that? Why wouldn't the people that designed the carburetor just do that? Why wouldn't the people that manufactured, the OEMs that put it on the car, why wouldn't they just do that? Because that didn't happen. That's why. Chris, I've played with Q-Jets and 305s and TPIs a lot. Yep. 25 miles per gallon in a 77 Camaro. That's good fuel mileage. .305s need 410 gears, a 3,000 RPM converter, headers, a cam, cheap 150 horse nitrous kit, then start with carbs and intakes and cylinder heads. Run a Rochester Ramjet. Are you talking about the factory mechanical fuel injection on the 327s? The 283 wouldn't be a good choice because that's a pretty small one. But the 327, the L84, the 375 horse 327, is that what you guys are talking about? Why cruise mode is hard to get into and stay in. ECM is always looking for any reason to kick it out. The Honda does that. The VX did that. It would go into lean burn, but you have to satisfy a few different parameters before it will do that. For fuel mileage, nothing beats direct injection. I don't have any faith in the 305 heads to flow enough to support 454 injectors. Well, I need to know what the flow rate of those injectors are to see. But given the fact that those in the throttle body injection for a 455, if that's what we're talking about, that was designed to feed 230 horsepower. So it's pretty easy to make a lot more than that, even with a 305. So you could get to a point where you need 454 injectors. 6-liter Summit Pro LS, Ford bottom end, ARP hardware checking in. Okay, you have all that. That's all good stuff. You can see the day when fuel injection guys are on the side of the road and carb guys drive right by. Why would the carb guys be working and the fuel injection guys are not going to be working? Got 28 miles per gallon and an LB9 TPI. A Toyota Starlet that got 61 miles per gallon. At some point, the TBI itself is an air restriction. Yeah, isn't the big block throttle body bigger than the small block throttle body on those two? Have you ever done a dyno pull with an engine that's running at 14.7? You mean at wide open throttle? I don't recommend that. I've seen a dyno test where an engine is running leaner than the optimum air fuel. Yeah, we've loaded motors where it's 14.7 because we haven't adjusted the air fuel yet. But you don't want to run wide open throttle at Stoic. I've not seen that be very good for anything other than blowing parts up. Up to 73%. We're going to close out that because we've got one more minute. We're going to end our poll. '62 VW got 45 miles per gallon. Jesse, yours gets 7.5. Yeah, my 454 didn't get very good. Ours was in the 5.6 range when we were towing stuff. I remember that. Some of the other big block TPI setups for an adapter on a quadrijet intake. I remember those. So one heads were 85, 185, 190 CFM. That's actually not too bad for a small block Chevy head. Northern Performance, what's up? 89 CRX. I got 56 miles per gallon on long trips. Was it a high fuel CRX at least? to make an 89. I don't think that they had. Did they had the high fuel in 89? I don't think they did. Adapter had coolant passages in it to heat the air mix. I'd like to run some TBI tests, although we're you just almost immediately run into airflow problems and then fuel flow problems with that. High fuel 2-valve motor. Okay, yeah, those did get really good mileage. Reloading. Your throttle body injected motor was programmed to run at 14.7 at wide open throttle. It seems like a recipe for disaster. Eric had a good video that showed early Pro Comp heads from 10 years ago flowed less than stock iron heads at 400. Were they small block or big block heads? What kind of heads were they? Yeah, if you run wide open throttle at 14.7 for a length of time, you're going to get some piston heat and probably scuff them up pretty bad. That's been my experience. One more minute. Got my fan going though. Got my number one fan. $82 heads, 47, 993. Okay. $5760 and 81 vortex run closed loop at 14.7 for up to a minute at wide open throttle. Under wide open throttle, what's a good air fuel for an LS? For an NA LS, we normally run them like at 12.5 or something. Man, Chris, if that's true, are they taking a bunch of timing out of them? $12 to 1 for power. Yeah, that's what wide open throttle is. That's if you're going to wide open throttle, you're doing it for power, right? Yeah, and your air fuel is that you want under boost is different. It'd be more like 11.5. Run my small block at 12.5 to 1 full throttle. That's a good safe air fuel. If it's an NA one. And it's supposed to be 12.5 to 1. Well, you can run it as lean as 13 to 1 when guys are trying to get spicy. And we see that on the dyno that guys want to, you got to run 13.1 or 13.2. Like, you actually don't have to. What we do, I don't care about a number. We just adjust the air fuel until it stops making power. And wherever that is, if we go from 12.8 to 13.0 or 13.1 and it didn't add any power, we go back down to 12.8 because we know that 12.8 is going to be safer than 13.0. I remember the Focus that I had would run lean at wide open throttle, but it had a timer on it, but it wouldn't do it for very long. I go by plug readings and never lie. Neither does the dyno. The combination either either wants more fuel or it doesn't, and a dyno will tell us whether it wants it. Sometimes there's not a big difference in power between 12 to 1 and 13 to 1. That's true. There's not. People shouldn't argue about air fuel numbers. And you see the tune port on a 400. I don't even have a 400, so that won't be for a while. We know what it does. We ran them on a 383, so. But an L69 305 with more cam. Yeah, we did that already. We did 305s with carburetors and camshafts. We know what those do. You can add nitrous. We ran nitrous on it. If you look at the videos, I ran nitrous on the 305, a cammed and cylinder headed and intake manifold 305. We ran nitrous on it. We ran a blower on it. Andy, yours will be the last one. LQ4, LQ9, the best pick. And LQ9 has more compression. So if you want it to make more power, it will make more power than LQ4. But either one of them is a really good choice. And on that note, it is time to go. I will see you guys all tomorrow.